You're right, it is a failure of politics on the part of those who are refusing to sit down at the executive table. The Ulster Unionist Party, the SDLP and the DUP are ready to have an executive meeting, want to have an executive meeting, have agreed papers that should go to the executive meeting. There's only one party that is refusing to come to the executive table, and therefore all of the blame should be attached to them.
Because you refuse to move forward on the issue that is of most importance to them, the devolution of policing and justice. Well, if you were prepared to move forward in that, they would come to the table.
Well, I have a lot of issues on my political agenda, my party political agenda. I want to see the issue of parading resolved. I want to see the reduction in the number of members of the Assembly. I want to see a reduction in the number of departments. I want to have voluntary coalition rather than a mandatory coalition. But I'm not saying to anybody that until you meet my demands and my political agenda, I'm not going to sit down at the executive table. That's what Sinn Féin are saying.
Well, what they're saying is that they need to have some kind of agreement that you're prepared to move this issue forward, which you're flatly saying you're not. I mean, the devolution of policing and justice is not something that's in your gift.
Well, I'll come to the issue of policing and justice, and that's not what I'm saying on it. But I want to deal first of all with the issue of why the executive isn't meeting. Let's be very clear. We all have our own party political priorities. We're entitled to have them. We're entitled to push those issues. But what we're not entitled to do is to put a gun to the head of the general community and say, we're going to make you suffer until our opponents concede to us on our political demands. We have a legal duty. We have a moral duty, we have a political duty to do the work that we pledged to do. That's what we should be doing now.
But you also have a duty to agree an agenda for executive meetings. You and Martin McGuinness are the co-chairs of the executive committee. It's your responsibility in the statute to agree an agenda. It's not enough for you just to say, come along and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. It has to be agreed before the meeting begins.
Well, you mustn't have been following the discussion on this issue. An executive takes place on the basis of papers that are presented to the Office of First and Deputy First Ministers from ministers out in each of the departments. I have cleared the papers that have come in here. There are almost 30 ministerial papers which I have cleared. I have made it clear I'm prepared to accept any of those on the agenda. Martin McGuinness himself has cleared a dozen of those papers. And I said, well, we've both agreed on these 12 papers, let's have them on the agenda, but he refuses to do that. Yeah. On that basis, I said, well, look, let's have an open agenda. I've even said, let's just deal with the one big issue facing our community at the present time, the financial crisis. Let's have that on the agenda. They refuse that as well.
Fine.
Don't blame me. If you want to take it out, and you're entitled to take it out on politicians, but take it out on the right ones.
But the problem is not what you will agree to talk to, but what you won't agree to talk to or talk about. It's not enough for you to say, surely, come along and we'll talk whatever you want. You should both be going in with papers, position papers, negotiation positions, which will thrash this out once and for all. And that's just not happening.
Thrash what out? What issue do you want me to thrash out at the executive?
Devolution of policing and justice.
It's not an executive matter. That's a party political matter. It's not a matter. It's not a function of the executive. It hasn't been devolved, therefore the executive doesn't
have
any say.
But you have to agree the devolution.
Not at the executive, we don't. It is not.
Well, what are you going to do
then? Just hold on a second. Try and do it within the law as the law stands. It is not an executive matter. It is not an issue to be discussed by the executive. It is a matter to be discussed between the parties.
OK, so when are you going to do that?
Well, I've been doing it for months now, and indeed making progress on it for months now. I haven't been reluctant to deal with any of the outstanding issues, not just the one that happens to be of interest to Sinn Féin, but there are issues that happen to be of interest to the unionist community as a whole.
But this is the crucial one. Would you agree that? Now,
no, I don't agree this.
In terms of moving everything forward.
Yes, okay. So if I sit down and I say I'm doing nothing until we resolve one of the issues on my agenda, does that become the crucial one?
Well, even until you begin to think about resolving it.
I think it would be a good idea, if you're going to ask me questions, to allow me to answer the questions before you put another question to me. It is vital that we deal with all of the issues that are outstanding, not just the one that Sinn Féin decides should be taken before all others. If we allow that to happen, then we will have threats every day on the existence of the executive and of the Assembly.
But it is the one which you are putting to the bottom of the list. No, come back to this. It's not something that's in your gift, is it?
Well, that's just
it's
plain
part
silly.
of the St Andrews
It is
agreement.
hardly What is part of the St Andrews
The
Agreement?
devolution of policing and justice.
And so are all the other issues that I've mentioned.
Yes.
All of these issues have to be dealt with, and I want to deal with them. It doesn't mean that one should be taken out of sync with the others. It doesn't mean that one becomes a greater priority than the others. But I have been dealing with policing and justice. I've said publicly that we want to have the powers of policing and justice devolved, but they must be devolved in the right way, in the right manner, with the right structures, and with the right people who can get the confidence of the community in charge of them.
All right, but you've also talked about the confidence of that community, and the most recent poll showed that even a majority of your party wanted that devolution to happen within the next 12 months, and overall it was something almost 53% or 51% of your party in the most recent poll said they wanted it done within 12 months or earlier.
It showed that a very small percentage wanted it to happen immediately. A slightly larger percentage wanted it to happen within the next year.
Yes.
And it showed that almost half of the party's support didn't want it to happen for some years or didn't want it to happen at all.
So, but a majority wanted it within the next 12 months or sooner. You accept that?
Do you understand what the powers of policing and justice are?
Yes, I do.
Well, let me tell you. They are powers that affect every single citizen.
Yes.
Therefore, it is vital, because of its sensitivity, that it carries the confidence of the community as a whole. Not just the unionist community, but the whole community. And it's very clear that people must have confidence that if it's going to the Assembly, that the people in the Assembly are capable of dealing with it. And we look at the events of this weekend. Does anybody think that helps build confidence in our community, that the people who would have a say if policing and justice was to come into an assembly are out there on the streets protesting against the very people who are upholding law and order?
You said in a recent speech at an Orange Hall in Omagh, you called Sinn Féin obscene, immoral, destructive and self-seeking over this. What kind of language is that for the First Minister in a power-sharing assembly, a power-sharing executive to be using?
It was not about the parade for the soldiers. It was about a counter-parade by Sinn Féin, which was intended to bring a large number of people into the centre of Belfast in a way that was intended to be provocative, which could lead to violence on our streets.
Well, the view of Sinn Féin is, of course, that the initial idea of the parade was provocative.
Well, how could it be provocative? It's happening throughout the United Kingdom. These are our troops. They have served well in Iraq and Afghanistan. I saw it myself. I saw the work that they were doing in reconstructing.
But the decision by Belfast City Council was taken
that they
along
were doing
sectarian
in
lines.
The new Afghan army. This was good work that they were doing whenever I watched them in Afghanistan. They are back, and they are back safely, and I think we should be there to welcome them. Why should we not be allowed to welcome home our troops?
Why could you not welcome them at a service in St Anne's Cathedral, for example?
We will be. Why should we
Without
be
the
excluded
parade?
from? Why should we be excluded from having the homecoming parade?
Why should Republicans be excluded from having a counter-parade?
Well, they're not. There's another 364 days in the year that they could have it. There's another 23 and a half hours in the day that they could have had it. They decided quite deliberately to have it at the same time and at the same place in order to provoke and intimidate.
Isn't this a symptom, though, of the wider political failure? Do you think if agreement was moving ahead on the devolution of policing and justice that there would be this row over Sunday's parade?
Why have you got such an issue about the issue of policing and justice? You take one...
Well, because it is the issue which is keeping Sinn Féin out of the executive. It seems a fairly reasonable basis.
And if it wasn't there, would there be something else? Would it be the Irish language next? Would it be something else? I'm not going to be threatened by Sinn Féin that unless I meet their demands, they're not going to do the job that they're paid to do, that they're legally required to do, that they pledged to do. I am ready to have a meeting of the executive. I'm ready to deal with all of the issues of the executive, but I'm not going to be forced to taking a decision unless the terms are right for the unionist community that I would not otherwise take.
So it's the unionist community which is important, not the overall community.
Well, are you expecting me...
Well, I'm expecting you as First Minister to represent everyone's views
Well,
and everyone's
heard,
interests.
Again, you butt in before I give a reply. Let me reply. Do you expect me, as someone who was elected on a manifesto, to dump my manifesto to implement the manifesto of Sinn Féin? I certainly will not be doing that. I have been pledged to the unionist community that I will not have the powers of policing and justice devolved until the terms are right. And that's what I'll do. That's what I will deliver.
When you think the terms are right, so you're acting in a purely party political way, here, not in the wider interests of the people of Northern Ireland.
I am elected by the people of Northern Ireland on a manifesto. That's what people are going to get. That's why they voted for me. I will deliver what I have pledged myself to deliver.